So the last video was about underpainting, and we produced this. So this next part is going to be about how to think about painting over it on the one hand, but also the specific colors that I have that I want you guys to use. There's only 2 colors this time because for the purposes of painting one, I like to move through color in logical steps. So we're going to start with a 2-color palette plus white. You're always going to get white. In oil painting, you always have white. But you only have 2 colors, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. When it comes to talking about color, color has 3 dimensions, okay? Value, hue, and intensity. Value is how light or dark something is. Hue is the name of it, whatever, yellow, green, doesn't matter. Whatever you want to call the color. And then intensity is how bright it may or may not be. And that's something we'll talk about in more detail later. But the palette that I have set up for you guys today, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, is about temperature. Temperature is an oversimplification of hue. We aren't saying whether or not something is blue or purple or green. We're saying something is either warm or cool in relationship to something else. And everything is either warm or cool. It doesn't matter. You can have warm blues. You can have cool reds. That kind of stuff goes back and forth. So just playing on the palette for a little bit, I'm going to make what are called threads or strings. And by the way, when you're using a palette knife to mix your colors, you want to keep the color and the paint on the bottom. So it should look like that when you're using it. So that's going to be a middle warm. That's going to be a light warm. And I can go a little bit lighter when I need to. This will be a middle cool. I'm trying to make them the same value. This will be a warmer cool. And then we can have some darker values down here. A little bit of white. Okay, and now that we have our strings set up, we kind of know these are not necessarily the values I'll be using, but this is a good idea as a way to start. Now, when we bring these colors together at the same value, you can start to see we get some really nuanced sort of colors. And they're always the same value. Now, ultramarine blue and burnt sienna here are basically complements. And you can see that got a little bit darker when we mixed them together. I think the blue is a little darker. But these two, when you put them together evenly, they're complements, so they'll neutralize each other. And you should be able to get a fairly nice middle gray out of either one of these. That's kind of in the middle. That's a slightly dark cool. That's going to be our warm dark. So now, in the underpainting part, we used mineral spirits to thin the paint so that we could move the paint around. We used its transparency to let the white of the painting show through. When we go to make the color portion, where the oil paint is the consistency that it's coming out of the tube, you don't really want to use mineral spirits. If you feel the need to, you can, but just the tiniest bit. You don't want to add, you don't want to water the paint down. Hopefully on the palette you can kind of see how it's moving around. It's pretty fluid. But the lighter areas are going to be where you're going to build up your paint. The darker areas are where you can allow it to get a little bit thinner. So I'm going to just go over a couple different ways to apply the paint, and then you guys can decide sort of how to proceed. But one of the big questions that comes up when you're talking about going into a painting with color is, where do I start? Now I have 3 different things to think about when it comes to where to start. And so I'll go through those, and a lot of the time if you just go through all 3 of them, you'll have something in your painting that is all 3. So we might say that we're going to start from back to front. We might say that we want to start from dark to light. And then the third one would be from the biggest color to the smallest color. So in this one, the darkest and the furthest away are here, so that makes sense. We could start there. The biggest color is going to be the table. So we could do that, and that would be some of the shadow colors plus this. That would be easy. And then we could do this. And then we could work inside. And I guess a fourth way to talk about what to do when is you want to work from the outside in. So one of the last things I want to do is be resolving these things. I want to get them surrounded with colors that I know are right before I really start going into any details at all. So what I'm going to do is go through and just decide what temperatures are going to go where. So my background here is going to be cool. I know that my tray is warm. My table, it's not particularly warm, but it's one of the warmer colors out here. The lights on the garlics that are in the light, they're lighter, and in places slightly warmer. So, and then this guy is, it's cool compared to this, but it's warm compared to this. So it's going to be in between. It'll be interesting to paint that. So I'm going to get started with dark to back to front. Let's start there. So I know I want this area back here to be cool, and I know that it's going to be dark. So I can scoop up as long as I allow the color back here to lean towards the blue side. I know that I'm right. And this is just for scrubbing. This is a round brush. It's actually not the best brush for scrubbing, but I don't have one with me. But there's a shape of a brush called Bright. It's a flat brush with short bristles. And that's going to be a brush that you're going to want to use to scrub. But this one's a worn down round. And you can see I'm just scrubbing this in. This doesn't really require any skills. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm blocking the color in where it needs to go. All right. Now the table is going to be, down here it's going to be fairly light and fairly warm. a little bit cooler. So you can see I'm just scrubbing it in again. And one of the things I want to do is make sure that it's not totally even all the way across. The light is on the left and it's coming through this way on the still life. So if I allow my color to get a little bit cooler on this side, that's going to be okay. And as it moves to the left, things can be a little bit lighter. And hopefully you can see how much paint I'm using. I'm almost out of the white that I put out originally. All right, so this part in here, the shadow part, it's going to have to be cool. A little bit too cold and probably a little bit too dark. That's pretty good. Now, as the box goes back in space, I'm going to need to make sure that this color gets a little bit darker. And I actually made it lighter. So maybe I'll go lighter here. I'm just trying to keep it kind of smooth, let it go back. All right, same kind of thing over here. Now the shadow that's underneath the orange tray here is actually warm. So I'm going to bring that in. Now you can, once you put the paint on, you can manipulate it if you want to. And with these areas here that are a little bit darker, you can buff them with a cloth. If you want to let some of that color that from the underpainting, if you want to let that come through, you can buff it a little bit and let some of that warmth come back. That can be kind of interesting looking. I'm going to do that again and with the tray, and you'll see. And that surface a little bit smoother. So I'm just taking straight burnt sienna and putting it on the tray. And when I'm going to get this all blocked in, I'm going to wipe it off. And that's going to show the full strength of burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is like a really dark brown, but when it's used transparently, it actually becomes a fairly bright orange. And that can be really beautiful. So we're going to try to work that up here. And then I can paint into it with other colors as I go. But what I'm going for here is a state for the painting that I refer to as organized. So by organized, it means that all the big basic color relationships are in. Once you get there, then you can start worrying about detail.